A very good day to my dear students of Standard 10th and welcome to the fantastic world of microbiology. In the words of Dan Buckley, a professor of microbial ecology, microbes or microorganisms have been here since life began, almost 4 billion years. They created the system that we live in and they sustain it. We may not see them, but they are running the show. So let's continue to learn how microbes are important to the welfare of the human society in Chapter 7, Introduction to Microbiology. The very first naturally occurring antibiotic drug discovered and used was penicillin, and it was discovered accidentally. Since the discovery of penicillin, many other antibiotics have been discovered and developed. So what are antibiotics? Antibiotics are chemical substances produced by microorganisms that inhibits the growth or kills other microorganisms. So basically antibiotics against life. It literally means against life. But what kind of life is it against? These are antimicrobial drugs which are obtained from molds, fungi and some other soil bacteria, and they are developed to combat harmful microorganisms, also called as pathogens, which are responsible for causing various diseases. Now, antibiotics are produced on a large scale by fermentation process, which is induced by microorganisms. And antibiotic agents, these are substances which are biologically produced or they are produced through some chemical synthesis in the laboratory, and they kill or inhibit the growth of microorganisms. There are two groups of antibiotics which you have learnt in Standard 9. They are classified as narrow spectrum or broad spectrum. Now, narrow spectrum antibiotics act against a limited group of bacteria, but broad spectrum acts against a larger group of bacteria. There are some antibiotics like penicillin, cephalosporins, monobactam, bacitracin, erythromycin, gentamicin, neomycin, streptomycin, tetracyclines, vancomycin. Now all these are used against various strains of gram-positive and gram-negative bacteria. Now what are gram-positive and gram-negative bacteria? These are gram-positive bacteria are classified by the color they turn after a chemical called as gram stain is applied to them. So gram-positive bacteria stain blue when this stain is applied, that is the gram stain is applied. The other bacteria will turn red, and so they are called as gram-negative. Both of these bacterial strains, they are structured differently. Okay, so their cell walls are of different structure, and so they cause different types of infections, and different types of antibiotics are effective against them. Now, antibiotics can be misused. So how can you prevent the misuse of antibiotics? How to avoid antibiotic resistance? What does resistance mean? Resistance means the antibiotic will no more work for you. Now, how does this happen? When we misuse, when we don't use the antibiotics properly. So what should we do? What precautions should we take while taking antibiotics? So take antibiotics as prescribed by a medical practitioner. Complete the entire course even if you feel better. Do not save antibiotics for future use. Do not take antibiotics for a viral infections, since viral infections like colds and cough do not get cured by antibiotics. And do not use someone else's antibiotics. So what works for one person may not work for the other. So only take if the doctor prescribes it to you. Now this is also an amazing world of microorganisms, how they have brought about this fantastic world of antibiotics, and their usage has been so very helpful in treating various diseases. Now let's move ahead. Which different materials are decomposed in biogas plant? Now you know what is a biogas plant. Biogas is basically gobar gas, and it is prepared by the usage of various waste materials like dead leaves, waste food and dung, excreta, etc. So all these are used in preparation of biogas. So let's see what are the different materials. Examples will be agricultural waste, municipal waste, dead plant, animal material, sewage, green waste and food waste. Which useful materials are obtained through it, and which is the fuel which comes out of all this? The answer is methane, carbon dioxide, H2S, that is hydrogen sulfide. All these are materials, and manure. All this is obtained through biogas. Out of this, which is the fuel which is obtained, is methane. Decomposition occurs through which organisms? Decomposition of organic waste occurs through bacillus type of strain of bacteria. These are specifically methanogens bacteria. Now let's understand and learn how microbes are used in the production of fuels. So basically, gaseous fuel methane can be obtained by microbial anaerobic decomposition, that means respiration which occurs in the absence of oxygen. So that decomposition occurs of waste, agricultural and industrial. Gaseous fuel methane, is obtained through this decomposition of both agricultural and industrial. Next, ethanol. Now what is ethanol? It's a type of alcohol. It's a clean, smokeless fuel obtained during fermentation of molasses by the yeast Saccharomyces. Now hydrogen gas. Hydrogen gas is considered to be the fuel of the future. Hydrogen is an energy carrier that can be used in internal combustion engines or fuel cells, producing virtually no greenhouse gas emissions. That's how it's a good alternative to fossil fuels when combusted with oxygen. The only significant emission is water vapor. So scientists are trying to, as much as possible, bring out alternatives to the regularly used fuels like petrol, diesel, etc. So hydrogen gas is released during biophotolysis. Now what does biophotolysis or photolysis means? Photolysis mean? It means that it's breaking up of, that is, the water molecule dissociates into molecular hydrogen and oxygen in a biological system, and this happens in the presence of light. And photoreduction. Photoreduction means a reaction that takes place with the presence of light. Similar to fuels, various industrial chemicals are also produced through microbial processes. Example, various alcohols, acetone, organic acids, fatty acids, polysaccharides, etc. Now all these are raw materials which are useful in the chemical industries. Some of these are useful as raw materials even for plastic and food products. Now we come to one of the best solutions that scientists have been able to come up with to solve the problem of pollution. Okay, now pollution, one of the major causes of pollution is usage of fossil fuels. Now how can we stop the usage of fossil fuels? Unless we have a good alternative, a more sustainable way of using fuels, there is no way we can stop the usage of fossil fuels. So biofuel comes up with a very good solution for fossil fuels. Now how does this happen? This happens with the help of microorganisms. Now microbes are playing an increasingly important role within the production of this alternative fuel source, which is called as biofuels. So let's enter into the exciting world of biofuels. Now what are the biofuels made up of? There are different types of biofuels. Some biofuels are obtained from food related sources. Others are non-food sources like wood, etc. Algae also act as biofuels, and other sources which are synthetically produced in the laboratory, industrial laboratories. These fuels are available in solid, example would be coal, dung, crop residue. They are also available in liquid forms like vegetable oils, alcohol, etc. Gaseous forms would be gobar gas, coal gas, etc. These fuels are easily available and in plenty of quantity, so you can produce them on a larger scale. Now some microalgae species. Now this diagram is on page 82 of your textbook and it talks about biofuel production. So how do you explain this diagram? Now what happens is some microalgae species. I've already told you what are microalgae. These are algae which are not, you can't see them with the naked eye, so you can only observe them under the microscope. They are species of algae and they are rich in starch and their cell wall contain cellulose. In case of such algae, the cellulase producing microorganisms are used to convert this carbohydrate, this starch, into a simple sugar. And then all the biomass, that is the mass which is naturally available, can be fermented into ethanol. So what is exactly biofuel? Biofuel is a fuel which is made from biomass, that is either plant or algal or animal origin. These are all waste products which can be converted into fuel. Since biomass can be easily replenished, you can ensure that it is again available in nature. Biofuel is considered to be a source of renewable energy, unlike fossil fuels such as petroleum, coal and natural gas. These are the reliable fuels of the future. Now let's learn about microbes and their contribution to the environment. There must be a better way to clean up this pollution, a way to not just remove it from the environment, but break it down into harmless compounds that can be just dispersed back into nature without causing harm and hazard to the living organisms. Let's enter this interesting and exciting world of microbial pollution control. So solid waste, sewage and various pollutants are ever increasing with the increase in pollution levels. Along with it, ever increasing diseases and degradation of the environment are worldwide problems. So these are issues which the world is facing today. So these are different images which give us the grim picture of what's happening with the environment, and as it affects the environment, it also affects all the living things that are present in the biosphere. So you can see how the world, from you can say every country of the world is facing this crisis of pollution and the harms and the dangers that it brings along with it. Especially cities in densely populated countries like India are affected with these problems. life of the future generations will be very difficult if these problems are not solved at the right time and to the right extent. So let us see the role of microbes in the environment. You already know that microbes are used for the disposal of solid waste through biogas, plant and compost production. So these are the two ways in which the solid waste is disposed of. One is using them in biogas plant and the other is using them to prepare compost. Now, how does urban waste that is accumulated in tons, can you be, what are the ways, what are the methods in which this urban waste can be disposed of? There are 6 effective waste disposal methods. 1, we begin with preventing or reducing the waste. Next is recycling, incineration, composting, landfills, ocean dumping. So these are the different ways in which the waste is disposed of. Now, why is it that the municipality asks us to segregate, to separate the wet and the dry waste? Segregation of these waste in each homes makes it easier to apply different processes like composting. So composting happens only of organic waste, that is leftover food, fruit peels, etc. So unless we separate the wet waste, the kitchen waste, etc. from the dry waste can be sent for recycling as well as for incineration. Now, what is done to the segregated waste? The dry waste is sent for recycling and the wet waste is used for compost preparation. So this helps to keep the environment healthy and that stops the spread of diseases. The dry waste, again, as we mentioned, is sent for recycling and also the wet waste is converted to compost preparation. So with this, the environment remains clean and also the spread of diseases is prevented. And amongst all this, which is the most appropriate method of disposal of dry waste? The most appropriate method is recycling. You've learned the 7 R's of waste management last year. Rethink, reduce, reuse, recycle. All these are different ways in which we can ensure that the waste that we generate in our daily lives gets reduced and so that poses a less risk to the environment. Now, there are 2 ways in which the trash that is generated can be disposed of. One is called as the dumping method. So basically there's an open space and in which the trash is buried. The other and most secure way of disposing of the waste is creating a landfill. So what is a landfill? It's a carefully designed structure which is built into or on the top of the ground in which the trash is isolated from the surrounding environment. Now, what is the surrounding environment? It can be the groundwater, it can be air, it can be rain. So all this is created. A landfill site is created in order to dispose of the dry waste. So degradable waste being accumulated in urban areas is used for this purpose. Large pits are dug in open spaces far from residential areas and those pits are lined with plastic sheets. Now there are always different layers which are created in a landfilling site. What do? You ensure that the groundwater level does not get affected by all the liquid residue that comes out by the degradation of the waste. And for that you create a bottom line system which is made up of plastic and that prevents the leachate. Now what is the leachate? Leachate is all the unwanted liquid which is given out when the waste starts getting degraded and therefore with this what do? You kind of create a barrier between the waste and the groundwater. Next, what happens is this barrier also protects the groundwater and all from the toxic and the harmful materials. As we mentioned, it is called as leachate. Now there are different layers. One is the clay barrier right down, where above that is the plastic liner. So the clay barrier prevents soil and water contamination, so does the plastic liner. Then there is another line which is created to collect the leachate. Then there's the refuse cell. So all the compacted garbage is then kind of pushed down, and so different layers are created, and those are called as cells. So once the lower layer of garbage gets decomposed, gets degraded, then another cell is created. Okay, and lastly, once the trash is now dumped in, then a cover is put. Now what is this cover? This cover is also called as a cap. Now what does this cap do? This cap is made up of polyethylene material, and this cap is a layer which is almost 2 feet, and then compacted soil is put on it so that all the trash does not get in contact with the environment. Okay, now next is compressed waste is dumped in the pit. It is covered with layers of soil, sawdust, leafy waste and specific biochemicals. Now what are biochemicals? These are naturally occurring chemicals which are added to the layer after the compressed waste is dumped. Then it is added in the layers in order to start the degradation of waste. Bioreactors are mixed at some places. Now what is a bioreactor? Basically it's a landfill site specifically created by the municipal authorities, and in which a liquid is added to help the bacteria break down the waste. Microbes present in the soil and other top layers, they decompose the waste. Completely filled pit is sealed with the soil slurry. Now what is a slurry? It's a semi-liquid mixture which contains clay, sand, cement and other particles. All this is suspended in water. Such landfilling sites can be reused after removal of compost. So once one of the layers gets completely decomposed, then it gets converted into nutrient-rich compost. Then the compost is removed off. Again the site can be used as a landfill. Now let's learn about another very important contribution of microbes in sewage management. Okay, all living things including ourselves and microbes need food to grow, maintain and repair their cells, and to provide a source of energy for life. However, we cannot digest all the food we eat, and what remains undigested ends up in the sewage system. So sewage is not only composed of the waste that we give out, it also consists of other types of waste. So coming from different origins, like last day you learned about a completely a way of classifying waste, and in that you learned about urban waste, toxic waste, industrial waste. So all this can also become a part of domestic sewage. So in villages, domestic sewage is disposed of either in nearby soil or in biogas plant. But what happens in cities? Sewage needs to be carried to processing unit and acted upon by microbial processes. Microbes which can decompose any compound as well as destroy the pathogens of cholera, typhoid, etc. are mixed with the sewage. So these are different diseases which can be caused through this sewage water being a cause of contamination of regular drinking water. So in order to avoid all this, sewage water needs to be treated with specific microorganisms. So these microorganisms, they release methane and carbon dioxide by decomposition of the carbon compounds which is present in sewage. There is a specific type of bacteria called phenol oxidizing bacteria, which are Pseudomonas species. Okay, so basically these are all coming from Pseudomonas species, and they decompose the xenobiotic. Now what does xenobiotic mean? So these are chemical substances which are found within an organism that is not naturally produced or expected to be present within the organism. So all our body waste that we give out does not only contain undigested food. Now when we eat vegetables, etc., or we consume seafood, so all the synthetic material, that is all plastic and all different types of chemical through the food chain, enters from one organism to other. So all these are xenobiotic chemicals. The sludge. Now what is the sludge? The sludge is the residue of the sewage, whatever is left over that settles down in this process can be used as the fertilizer. Water released after microbial treatment is environmentally safe, and microbes are used for bioremediation. Now what is this word bioremediation? We'll learn about it. And all these processes help to control environmental pollution which is caused due to sewage. Now bioremediation, a remedy provided by biological organisms like microorganisms, uses naturally occurring bacteria, fungi or plants to degrade substances, to break down substances that are toxic, hazardous to human health or the environment. Bioremediation is a branch of biotechnology that employs, that means it uses living organisms like microbes and bacteria and fungi, etc., in the removal of contaminants, pollutants and toxins from all kinds of environment like soil, water, etc. So with this we come to an end of today's lecture. We'll learn more about the contribution of microorganisms to the welfare of human society in the next class. Till then, stay healthy, stay safe, and wishing you a wonderful day ahead.